the more unsettling thing is that you can pick out who's going to do really well in a pitch competition, like top 10%, without knowing the idea. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on in the signaling environment. The big takeaways that I have for my classes are essentially calm and hand movement gets you a lot of the way there. So there's a lot of cues that people take off of really novel ideas, that sort of gut determination. And there's a huge amount of research here. There's some research that's shown that attractive men overperform. Our research showed that behaving in a feminine way, whether you're a male or a female, can be very detrimental to a pitch.
Here is something interesting. Some of the best entrepreneurial decisions are made before there is enough data to feel confident about them. And that's exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. Through our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship. And this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today, and joining us is Tony Briggs, full executive professor at Alberta School of Business, University of Alberta, and he's also executive director of the eHUB Entrepreneurship Centre. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great, let's start with your journey from biochemistry to patents to MIT to academia. How did all that come together into studying entrepreneurship and innovation?
Yeah, fantastic. As you might guess, it's a long story. I started off being very interested in science and did a biochemistry degree, honors level degree, and was really interested not in pursuing a PhD in that space, but getting into the area of biotech startups. I had some different research experiences, one with a startup, another one with a large chemical company in my undergraduate, and just saw a certain taste of business. Also really sort of enjoyed finance and had a knack for that. So I did an MBA in that space as well. From there, a little serendipity, the sort of small venture finance market fell out of Western Canada where I was located. And I happened to get a job. I was looking for a lot of different jobs and got offered a position in licensing, which was a sort of new emerging area at the University of Alberta to manage patents. And I managed some agricultural technologies as well. From there, after about a year, still quite ambitious, quite interested in the US, was able to secure a great position at Harvard Medical School, doing technology licensing there. Really had a great time, 1998 to 2000 period. DNA chips were coming on board. The Human Genome Project was there. There was a tremendous amount of just amazing new biotechnologies that were kind of coming on the scene. And I was working with a lot of superstar professors around the commercialization of their technology. I did that for about 2.5 years, and I got interested in a number of different paths from there. I could have stayed there. I could have gone into consulting. I happened to also be quite interested in the academic side of things. There were some interesting, let's call it phenomena that I was seeing inside that role of some technologies moving forward and some not. Very early stage stuff, and really got kind of curious about probably more on the early stage innovation side, at least initially. So I was accepted into a program at MIT, spent a bunch of time there, kind of found a great faculty member, a guy named Paul Carlisle there that was doing some really interesting stuff around how patents were being used around sort of early moments of knowledge in the innovation process. And I got really attracted to that. Paul moved to Boston University. I complicated story, but I'm in the end moved with him, and he was just super supportive. And I met a few other core members in kind of just amazing people. Jay Barney was on my committee. He's kind of the father of resource-based view, and Nick Agris, a transaction cost economics person as well. Really looking at the interface between sort of knowledge objects and strategy and resources. And so I spent a lot of my time in that space. And as a general thing, you learn this kind of looking backwards on your career. I've always been really interested in incredibly high novelty conditions and the how people evaluate information in incredibly high novelty conditions. So probably the information side of entrepreneurship much more than the resource side of entrepreneurship. So lots of different topics I've explored over time, and a lot of things I've done all this time, but I'm always thinking about the sort of information space that people are making decisions in.
Very interesting. And what pulled you specifically into understanding how people evaluate ideas before there's a clear winner?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's probably two approaches. I didn't really tell my story about the University of Alberta, but that was also sort of fascinating. Sort of there's the one approach which I probably spent more time in the early stages thinking about was the economics of information. So thinking about some information is much harder to evaluate than other aspects of things. And so in my dissertation, I showed that people making decisions will sort of optimize the time invested in gathering certain kinds of information. So most this is not surprising, but most ventures, most innovations fail. So if you can get sort of cheaper information in terms of time of gathering the information, assessing the information, and eliminate failures sooner, that's sort of an economic view of how you manage information. I moved over to the University of Alberta. Was hired to be a person in technology commercialization, and then built a lot of entrepreneurship initiatives there. And there I was brought in largely by Mike Lounsbury and Royston Greenwood and another number of others. But Mike is known for this, among many things, this idea of cultural entrepreneurship. So the use of storytelling and using other types of cultural resources to develop resources to build the business. And so I've really had the last, let's say, pretty much the whole period of my time at the University of Alberta and the last 16, 17 years of my career at the interface of those two kind of views. Sort of one is a more material economic view of information, and the other is this more social cultural view of information. And just the opportunities between those, you can tell stories, but there has to be something material as well in between those things. And some people are great at making stuff and can't tell the story. Other people can tell a great story, but can't make the thing. And there's a lot of interface in that. And that's gets even more complicated as you start thinking about entrepreneurial teams and organizations and these things. But that's sort of the general space that I've had a lot of interest in.
Interesting. And before we go deeper, this is for our viewers. If you're enjoying conversation like this on entrepreneurship and innovation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn channel. We have got a lot more coming up. All right, Tony, you have been doing a lot of work on how entrepreneurs operate under incomplete information. So for someone starting out, how do you make good decisions when you don't have enough data?
Yeah, we thought a lot about this at our Entrepreneurship Centre, and as we build our early entrepreneurship experiences for students, there's quite a bit of philosophy around it. Our center, I'll take a step and sort of talk about the center that I co-founded with Mike Lounsbury and how we thought about it. We really thought about it from a cultural side in a very serious way, not a vague sense of culture, but sort of these ideas of storytelling, myths, rituals, creating legitimacy through symbols. These are a lot of things. We have a space that's in a very central space, is very visible. We spent a lot of time, it's kind of a fishbowl, so you don't want it to be too difficult for people to come in. But when people are inside, they don't want to be observed, but you also want it to be welcoming. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we, do the look and feel of this thing as well. But the basic idea is that, and this is more from the cultural side, that what we needed to do, entrepreneurship wasn't in the conversation at the University of Alberta in 2012, 2013. And what we wanted to do first was to make it a legitimate thing to do. So if people had a thought that they might want to do that, to feel that they were supported by their institution and that there was a place they could go and be encouraged to do that. So that stuff's sort of invisible. When you're younger and you come in, this idea that there's an infrastructure that's been put in place by others, we try to do that very consciously. There was a lesson I learned. I spent a bunch of time with a tremendous academic, a guy named Ed Roberts. I was his teaching assistant at MIT, and he was the founder of the Entrepreneurship Centre there. And I always thought that it was easy to be an entrepreneur at MIT because that's what MIT was. And when I got to the University of Alberta, I really recognized, sort of a little late in the game, first how much energy Ed, but many others, put into building and reinforcing the culture in terms of, you think it's easy, but I don't think it was ever easy. It was always a thing of sort of pushing the boundaries, building the culture, reinforcing it. And then it starts to become sort of something that reinforces itself. And that's something that MIT has been tremendously amazing at. And so we were trying to get that going. And so the thought around our center was, if we get enough students that feel legitimate doing it, other students will learn from them. Other students may compete with them. Other students may partner with them. And that's what sort of helps build your culture. So the first part is that sort of base where it's a legitimate activity to do. And then the next thing is like, where do you start that student, right? And a lot of thought has kind of come in there. And some stuff I'm doing now too, it's become more revealed, I think, because of the age of AI. How people are starting. But some people love to build. Some people are more visionary. Some people, and this is a more narrow group, we've learned a lot through Lean Startup and other things about how people need to take feedback from their environment. So that's a skill set, and that's a particular kind of person. And then there's other people that want to have large social impact. And all of those things they're all sort of requisite things. You want all of those aspects in an entrepreneur, but where do you start the entrepreneur? So we've been really focused on having the entrepreneur be a little bit more internal initially, to think about their purpose, what they want to do, and we have some exercises around that in the early moment. Sort of there's the textbook stuff, but as you get into them actually building, we try to do a lot more about the why question, the Simon Sinek stuff, the Christensen purposeful life kind of ideas, and to think a little bit about what they want to do and why they're doing it, and then to kind of start there. Though we still have people that are interested to build something and all those things, but that's a lot of how we kind of get them started. I'll maybe say one more thing here and maybe move on to a different question or a follow-on question. There's loads of resources. Like, there's never been more knowledge resources on how to do things, how to different elements of a business, whether it's lean or disciplined entrepreneurship or any other kinds of models that are out there. So the real question is, can you get a student to explore it? But they don't have to do it, just to become like all things at the university, so that they have that experience, so that maybe in the future when they want to start something, they can invoke that. They don't have to start it at school. It's like all things. All things we do at the university, we graduate people, they go into the world with their knowledge and they enact that. And some people might start doing entrepreneurship at the university, but many people do entrepreneurship much later in their career. So we want them to be able to activate what they've learned at school, maybe the resources and networks that they've built, maybe a little later in their career. So that's kind of how we think about it. Entrepreneurship is very tough because most people start much later. Ed Roberts' Entrepreneurs in High Technology, this older book around the MIT ecosystem, had people starting their maybe first technology endeavor in their late 20s, early 30s. I think we all know the stories are much younger than that, right? And then some recent work from others have actually shown that, your success rates go up, in really particularly around your mid 40s. And so the stories that we have and the realities that people doing entrepreneurship have are, at least in the Western sense and the more traditional high growth sense, are just really disconnected. So it feels like people are getting younger, but you still find that the data is really showing that it's a later in career kind of thing. So it's a tough thing to train for in that regards, but that's how we thought about it.
Yeah, very interesting. You have also analyzed elevator pitches and the stage signals. So do you ever watch a pitch and think this is either going to be a $1 billion company or a very expensive learning experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've done some stuff on pitches, which is really fun. I've learned a lot actually studying. We had data from the MIT pitch competition for the first few years. There's some unpublished stuff and some published stuff. Probably the more unsettling thing is that you can pick out who's going to do really well in a pitch competition, like top 10%, without knowing the idea. That's very unsettling. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on in the signaling environment. The big takeaways that I have for my classes are essentially calm and hand movement gets you a lot of the way there. So there's a lot of cues that people take off of really novel ideas, that sort of gut determination. And there's a huge amount of research here. There's some research that's shown that attractive men overperform. Our research showed that behaving in a feminine way, whether you're a male or a female, can be very detrimental to a pitch. So that angel investors and venture capitalists are very antagonistic towards communal behavior. We found that in ours. So there's all sorts of interesting findings that are kind of happening there. It's a bit challenging for me because having watched and measured so many pitches, we've looked at sound, voice content, charisma, appearance, a whole variety of things. So when you sit down, which I do sometimes to volunteer for some of these things, you kind of know the group, you know the individuals that the group's going to pick. And then there's who you think, which is not necessarily the same. And so it feels, the research tends to work. It can be quite predictive. There's a very problematic experience I had once on a thing where there are 20 people came in to pitch for a particular contest. And before even the pitches, I picked the winner. And you shouldn't be able to do that out of 20, right? But we do. We notice a lot of cues and things like that. Yeah, it's difficult. Maybe another way to think of it, there's many ways to think of it, but another way to think of it is that pitching well is a learned skill, right? Being able to tell a bigger story, being able to project confidence, being able to signal internally that you believe in the venture. These are important things that people judge. And there's the dark side of that too, because you have these charismatic people that show up, the sort of Elizabeth Holmes type of situation, where they're unflappable, the Bernie Madoff types, right? They're super legitimate. They're really well liked. People don't believe that they're just charismatic, let's say pitchers. So, the sort of proof is there, right? Some people, there's a social aspect to this and a learned skilled aspect to this that has a positive side in terms of raising capital for, let's say, a very important business, and a negative side, which is gathering capital for other purposes, I would suppose.
You have just zooming into the university ecosystem. You have helped build ecosystems like eHUB. So what role should universities really play in helping students move from school to startup?
Yeah, this is a really important question. I think universities play a massively important role. There's the training of young people to do things. I mean, I think that's sort of the first thing. Entrepreneurship rates are declining in a number of places, even though those of us at least in the Western sphere, it's been declining. The impacts of high technology startups are, incredible on the world. I think that's each year it becomes even more obvious, but it's obvious, as it stands. There's been a lot of recent work, and I'm part of this as well, a small part of this work, but just around the ecosystem surrounding entrepreneurs generally. In one of my classes, Edmonton's a small place where I teach. It has a really nice community now, and it's starting to have a sort of enough size to have enough feedback loops in it, and where people can move between startups or start new startups, this kind of thing. So it's actually become quite a nice place to study and to work in. But there's a lot of thought about what is the core infrastructure that you kind of have that supports entrepreneurship. Obviously, there's a lot more infrastructure, and I think people have been trying to figure this out for a while in the Silicon Valley region. If you look at stories there, the early days of HP, the university played a huge role. Frank Tiermeier and Stanford University. If you look today, both, I won't start naming universities, but the universities play an extremely high role. I was thinking about Berkeley Skydeck and the impact that it has there as well. Getting people sort of legitimacy, sure, actual access to resources, networks, relationships. Quite a number of years ago in 2013, MIT, well, before 2013, MIT had done a number of surveys of the impacts of universities on entrepreneurship, and showed absolutely sort of shocking numbers of what MIT graduates are able to produce. That got replicated. That was an Ed Roberts study. It got replicated by Chuck Easley at Stanford, even larger numbers. We did the first public institution version of that. Didn't get as much attention here in 2013, but we saw absolutely massive impacts of organizations being created by our alumni. And so, if you, to the degree of 1 in 5 alumni will create an organization coming out of the University of Alberta. So this is not a personality thing or anything like that. It's a core function of what well-trained people do, is to build new organizations. So, just following back from that, wouldn't you want to at least train them to do that, right? And provide that kind of service. And then on top of that, there's the infrastructure around the faculty and the research, sure, but also the networks that they build, the friends that they have, their ability to connect to other pieces of the local ecosystem. All of those kinds of things are, I think, just so important. Maybe to answer your question more simply, there's probably no more important organization than the research-intensive university for starting high productivity organizations.
Amazing. So I have a follow-up question with respect to your University of Alberta. What is something Alberta is doing that's actually working well?
What is something that we're doing that's working well? That sounds like a question for my president. It's a number of directions I can go. I love my department. I'm a huge fan of the institutional theory work that's done there. This sort of the Alberta School of Institutional Theory. This area that I mentioned before around cultural entrepreneurship is I think just a tremendous framing for people thinking about entrepreneurship outside of the more traditional venture capital financing terms. So I think that's been really important. We're a tremendous research producer. It gets a little bit more personal as you go kind of into sort of student impacts. We have a pretty large undergraduate certificate now in innovation and entrepreneurship. And what's been great there, I've been involved in a lot of the curricular development on that side. But one of the nice things that we've done there is because of maybe our institutional theory roots, and not just focused on venture capital and the kinds of academics that we interact with from folks all over the world, we've sort of started an entrepreneurship class, which is much broader than just high growth productivity entrepreneurship. It looks at things like indigeneity, inclusivity, trying to solve wicked problems, different forms of entrepreneurship that might be outside of just the productivity realm, but really looking into much more social aspects of things. So I think it's been really rewarding to me. I started as an innovation guy. I love innovation. That's kind of my bread and butter. But what's been personally rewarding to me, and that we've built into a lot of our programming, is all these other ways that entrepreneurship can kind of help uplift ecosystems, individuals in terms of their own meaning and the work that they do. So that's been very exciting for me. And I think that's something that we do very well.
Amazing. And talking about the students itself, so what's something students overestimate when it comes to startups?
That they overestimate? Oh, that's a hard question. I think we struggled a lot with making it real for students. That idea of sort of going beyond the idea and the paper and the exercise to trying to translate it into their own agency, their ability to do the thing itself, to spend or to give themselves direction. I've been giving a lot of students advice now. Students will say things like it's a tough job environment. It's always a tough job environment until you find a job, and it's particularly hard for people in the early part of their careers to do that. So I appreciate that. There's a lot of, not to dismiss the concerns, but to some degree the news, the broader information environment, the sort of turmoil all over the place, the chaos that seems to be ever increasing, has really, I think, knocked students off their feet a little bit. And so, a lot of the conversations in the courses are trying to really build agency. So maybe in a different way, we have some companies that have taken off and are quite exciting, but sometimes, and more often than not, it's that B student that has never sort of done anything other than classes or something like that, and they do an entrepreneurship capstone, and we try to get them to build something. Maybe it could be a physical product. There's some of that goes on, but a lot of times it's just how would you structure a company? Those kinds of questions, and to go through a pitch deck and to explore their idea, and they get feedback and everything like that, and they learn about how to do it. Some of those students are so proud of that experience, and then to be able to take that experience, when they have that experience, they don't necessarily go to a startup. They might go to, any kind of position with some sort of relevant experience that they can build from. It's Yeah, I don't think students engage in entrepreneurship. Most of them don't engage knowing what it is or how to pursue it. So they don't tend to, there's a few folks that overestimate themselves, like all things. That's I think I certainly did that when I was younger, and probably still overestimate everything, how quick I'll get to an email, how, all these things. But um, yeah, I think it's more just the not knowing and then sort of making something material, I think, is tremendously important. And university is just a great place to do that. So.
Amazing. And finally, where can people learn more about your work or eHUB?
Yeah, so eHUB is very easy. It's eHUB@ualberta.ca. I think in terms of my work, it's the never ending. I need to publish more, like all scholars, so I need to get my work out there. We have enabled everything. We've gone kind of all into generative AI and making sure that students can use all the tools themselves. So I was thinking about that question because you sent it earlier, and I was like, well, look me up on Gemini or look me up on Grok or ChatGPT or whatever it is. That those systems have read everything, and they'll have read everything I've done and I've read. So I appreciate that a lot.
Amazing. This was incredible, Tony. Thank you very much. And if there is one thing to take away from this conversation, entrepreneurship isn't about having perfect information. It's about learning how to move forward without it while building trust, judgment, and resilience along the way. Tony, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much, Harish. Thank you for reaching out, and I was thrilled to speak with you.
Great. And to everyone watching, if you have enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. See you in the next episode.